So welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us here today about hopefully an interesting session. Our topic today is maximizing the visual appeal of your Power BI report using HTML. But first of all, what does that mean? What is visual appeal? Because what appeals to me might not appeal to somebody else and might not be the right style or design for each company. There's millions of companies and different industries and different managers and different type of data. So there's not really one right way of visualizing data in Power BI. There's a lot of ways which are, let's say, not that good, but today I really don't want to argue about what's good and what's bad, because it depends. It depends on the requirements, it depends on the industry, it depends on the kind of data. So today I really want to just give ideas of how you could improve your reports using our HTML VizCreator custom visuals, and really just inspire you and hopefully show you a couple of things that you haven't seen before, or you maybe thought about and said, oh, that would be nice to do, but I don't know how. And hopefully after today's webinar, you'll go home or you go back to your PC or notebook and actually play around with the visual and get the chance to solve a problem that you've had for a while. So again, it's not about right or wrong. I'm going to show you a few things which might be good for one report, but too colorful and too fancy for other ones. If you are working in finance, you probably want to keep it simple and not too colorful. If you have a report for, let's just say, the marketing department, maybe then you know, it's not wrong to have something a bit more fancy and colorful. I've prepared a report, the one you see on screen, and the plan is to go from one page to the next, go through from left to right, talk a little bit about what we see on the page, but on every page also show you how things are done. On some pages, we're going to spend a bit more time, on some we're going to spend a bit less time. But one thing is important, I will try to not write any HTML code at all today. For me, it's very important for you to know and realize that even though the visuals are displaying HTML code, you as the user or the developer do not need to be an HTML expert. Okay, this is the first page. On the first page, we have an image. And by the way, one more thing I want to mention before we start, everything you see on all these pages is always only our visuals. The only other visual I'm using is the native slicer. Everything else is always done with our HTML VizCreator visuals. So here you see it's just an image. And there you think, okay, adding an image, I could just go to insert and add an image. It's a native functionality. There's no need to replace that with a custom visual. But as you will see later on, one of the advantages of using HTML is that we can make everything dynamic. Think of a visual where you can make every single element conditionally formatted. To show you this, for this image, I just added a simple slider which only just changes the size of the image. As a real use case, what this could be used for is, of course, if you in like a table, you want to add little green or red dots if a variance is positive or negative, and you want to change the size of those dots depending on the result of a measure. So if you have a very good result, you want to have a big green dot. If you have a slightly negative result, you want to have a small red dot. So there's always a lot of use cases for what I'm going to show you. Just think about what I'm showing you and then maybe think back of, you know, the reports you've created or the reports you've seen and where this feature and functionality might come in handy. You also see that I'm currently using the HTML placeholder of the visual, and I use a measure called webinar image. And when I look at the measure, and that might already be overwhelming because there is a lot of code in here, but please stay with me. Nobody wrote this code. All this was generated automatically, and I'll show you how it's done. In general, we have created a couple of tools which can be found on our website, which will help you working with our visuals which will make it easier and help you to get started with them. One of them is this converter. So I just head over to bisamurai.com/converter, and on this page, you can convert pictures, GIFs, and videos to Power BI DAX measures. There is a video showing how it's done. There's also a couple of screenshots, but actually it is very, very simple. We click to upload an image. I select the image, that's the one I want, open it, give it a name. I call it webinar image, and I copy the code, go back to Power BI Desktop, create a new measure, paste in the code that was just generated, hit enter, and that's it for the first step. So it's called webinar image. Let me get rid of this one here. Find my measure, webinar image, add the HTML VizCreator cert visual again, get the webinar image into the HTML, and I have my image back. But of course, right now, it's not linked to my slider. So, and you really need to think of the slider as not being a slider, but the result of a measure. So the sum of your actuals, a variance, number of employees, I don't know, but it's something dynamic coming from the data model, which then determines the size of an image or the color of something, or if something is bold or underlined or highlighted in color. So when we go back and look at this measure, that was just created by the tool, and we go to the very end, you see that somewhere down here, hope you can see it, we have the max width set at 100%. So what we can do is just replace this 100 with what's coming from our slider, from our what if parameter. And that is probably called parameter scale value. That's the measure from our what if parameter. And now my image should hopefully already change depending on what size I have selected here. So one simple use case to start with. Let's move on. Most of you, all of you, I guess, have actually seen this before. That is the registration page of this very webinar. So what I did here is actually I embedded the bisamurai.com website. First, we look at what we'll talk about today, and then I'll also show you how this was done. So what we will learn the main features and functionalities of the HTML VizCreator custom visuals, going through different use cases, different samples. How to create, again, visually appealing. What really is visually appealing? It depends, but I will give you ideas how you could improve the visual appeal of your reports. But still, I'll try to mention a couple of best practice tips, not only for visualization, but also maybe I'm going to spend a little bit time on some DAX. There's not much complex DAX in here, but just general learnings from our projects. Yeah, a lot of it will be demonstration. I really want you to walk out of this webinar today and feel ready to get the visuals a go and say, I actually want to use them and create something. And don't be scared about all the HTML code you'll see. If you've never used HTML at all, no worries. As promised, I'm not going to write any code today. Okay, so that's basically what we will cover. Now let's see how this was done. So again, let me just select the visual and find the measure which was used. And you can see it's quite a simple measure. This HTML returns a website. But as promised, I don't want to write this because, yeah, we're not going to write any HTML. So I'm going to show you, if you want to do this, how you could actually get to the proper code. So one of the resources which are important when starting or also when already using our visuals is the knowledge base. On the knowledge base, so you go to bisamurai.com, custom visuals, and then knowledge base. We have lots of articles showing how to do different things with our visuals. And now I want to embed a website. So let's search for website. And the first result is embed a website into Power BI. Sounds exactly what I want to do. All our knowledge base articles have a description. They have a sample report, which always can be downloaded. More and more articles also have a video embedded. And that's just a very good starting point when you want to learn a specific technique. Right now, we want to learn how to embed a website. And you can already see here is the code. So what if I just copy that? I copy that, go back to my report, create a new measure, paste it in. Also for website, we need to define the width and the height that it should use. I always recommend using percentage, so it is responsive. And we hit enter. And we already have a measure that has the same name. We call it website new. And let's just get rid of this measure and add our new one. And you'll see that we have the bisamurai.com website integrated into our report. There is one thing to note, that because of certain limitations that we have in custom visuals, you will, depending on the complexity of the website, you might not be able to see every single feature of a website. Our website is quite simple, let's say, most things. So I would say 90% of the website works fine, but there is just certain things that we cannot do because of there are restrictions coming from the custom visual site. But this is how you can embed a website. Now let's quickly talk about us, me and my two co-hosts for today. So my name is Pascal. I'm the founder and CEO of bisamurai. I'm your host for today. What I do on a daily basis is developing Power BI solutions for our clients, take care of our custom visuals, and also take care of other services and tools and software as a services solutions that we provide. And I am based in Switzerland. And then with me today, I'm very happy to have Rakesh. Also Power BI expert developer. He is one of the co-hosts today, so he's here. You should see him on screen now. He's extremely strong when it comes to Power Query things. He's the guy to go to for advanced analytics, and he's based in South Africa. And then also with me today is Ursula, one of our main Power BI developers, also based here in Switzerland. She's also one of the co-hosts. She has been working with our custom visuals for a long time. She has created, if you ever get to download the sample report, which I highly recommend, you will see a lot of elements that actually were created by her. And she's also helping out developing some of our other services and tools. My co-host today, they will be the co-host, they will be monitoring the chat. So feel free to post any questions, comments, concerns into the chat. They will be monitoring it. We should have time for a Q&A session in the end. If something important comes up, please still put it in the chat, and they might then unmute themselves and ask me if they find it's the right time to ask. Otherwise, we'll take questions also in the end. Cool. Okay. So how was this done? Again, you see all of this is in one visual, which is probably impossible or very difficult to do with native visuals. Not only to combine a large image, but also to have, I'm not even sure if we can have bold text in the native table visual, I'm not even sure. And integrate a list into this, and also have one row which is higher than the others. It looks like a simple thing to do, but actually with regular functionality, very, very difficult. And again, of course, we just make it dynamic. We switch between here. And one thing that's important to note is that, and I'll show you, we have 0 bookmarks in this report. So all these, a lot of this might be doable with having multiple visuals and put them in a group, and then have these buttons trigger bookmarks and show and hide different layers, and all the, I don't want to call it workarounds, but all the sort of messy things which are also hard to maintain. This is actually super easy to maintain. But let's look at the code a bit more. Basically, we have, this is simple DAX, no HTML included at all. We have a switch which changes between those 3 measures. So when I have host selected, which is 1, we display this measure. The co-host 1 is actually 2. Then we display Rakesh, and 3 is this. 3 is Ursula. Simple switch statement, very powerful. Still using it a lot, even though with field parameters, there is now different ways of doing it. Yeah, for some reason, I'm using a bit of both, but I can't really get away from the switch statement yet for that kind of functionality. So let's look at the host information measure in more detail. That's the measure shown right now. That's the one about me, let's say. That's what it looks like. And again, I don't even want to explain what that means. I just want to show you how to recreate it. To recreate that, because technically this is a table. This is a table with 2 columns and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. So let's create a table. We go back to bisamurai.com. We go to Custom Visuals, Tools, HTML Editor. And I like to put the editor into full screen mode, make it a bit bigger. And what this does is basically it's a rich text editor. So I can create a table. I said 2 columns, 5 rows. And on the right-hand side, I always automatically get the HTML code. So I don't need to write any HTML. The tool is doing that all for me. And I think we had the name, we had the role, we have today's role, post, we had tasks. In here we had a list, so I can also add a list here. We can say Power BI develop document, custom visuals, and what else do I do? Webinars. Webinars, my location is Switzerland. Then we had this was in bold. So very easy to add some formatting. I think that's already it. What I didn't want to have is the borders. So I can also select everything, right click and say table properties and set the border to 0. So now I don't have a border anymore. And this code over here on the right is exactly the HTML code which translates to this table. So I give this a name, table Pascal, copy the code, go back to Power BI, create a new measure, paste this in. Let's delete this for now. Get the visual in. I call it table Pascal. So now I have recreated exactly the same table in, I don't know, 2 minutes, which it would be more or less impossible to do with native functionality. And the image, by the way, we already have a measure for the image somewhere. It's Pascal image. I can just combine these things. So I can just add my image on top of here, concatenate this. And now I also have my image in here. Now it's just on top of the table. If I want, I could also add it into a specific cell of the table. There's really no limitations when combining different elements together. And this way, and using our online tools, we can really create things which seemed to be impossible before. And tables, I mean, tables are still super important. On the next page, we have another table. Again, one visual with combination of images and icons and yeah, and also done within a few minutes. If we look at the code, you might think, hang on, that wasn't done in a minute or two, but actually, yes, it was, because I created the initial table in Excel. For the image, I added placeholders. Right? It's easier to do the images later in Power BI. That's the table I want to transfer to Power BI. I highlight all the cells which are part of the table, go to Save As, navigate to where I want to save it. And now that's important. I save this not as Excel file, but as web page, and only the highlighted cells. So we save as HTML document, save, which means in here, I should now have a new HTML document. When I open it, opens in my browser. That's the table. Right click, view page source. I get all the code I need. Select everything, copy it, Go back to Power BI, create a new table. I'm going to start using underscores so I'll easier find them. Comparison, paste this in, and then I still need to clean this up a little bit. By default, Excel or HTML in general is using double quotes, and I need to replace them with single quotes. The easiest way to do it is just select one, then press Ctrl-Shift-L, which highlights all the same characters. Then just add a single quote, and now this measure will work. Of course, I need to add the double quotes in the very beginning and the very end, but that will give me exactly the same table. Nice, exactly the same table. What's missing are the images. And for the images, we already created an image before, right? We created image webinar, but with this long, long code. There's a different way to create images. We can also, if we head back over to the website, I go to an image on the website, say right-click, copy image address. And when I go back to the report, I can also, the source, the code itself, the structure will be the same, so I can reuse this code. Actually, I didn't mean to find an image of myself. I wanted an image of the visuals. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. The technique is the important thing here. So, image of myself, I paste in the code from the other measure I had from before, only so I have the main structure, because it doesn't matter if I load the image from the web or create it using our converter. Everything after the source is the part that I need to replace. And I understand this might be not that straightforward, but I've done this a few times, but really using, I messed it up, but using our knowledge base really helps with finding out how those things are done. So if you just search for, sorry, again, the wrong Windows V I wanted to do. So now the source is this PNG file, and of course I deleted too much. This will probably not work, but because there's a lot I want you to show, I'm going to speed things up a little bit. That's the measure I tried to recreate, where we load images from the web. And then I can just replace it in the table. So I know in the table, somewhere in my code, I have image 1 and image 2 hard-coded. Now I want to make it dynamic. So I go in here, I need to find it. And again, that's something that is maybe difficult in the beginning. After you've done it a couple of times, you know exactly where to look, and it should be easier to find. And the image 2. Flex, I can, okay. So now we should also have our icons back. So now that we have a table with the two visuals, I want to talk about them a little bit and tell you what the differences are. One of the main differences is that the HTML VizCreator cert is Microsoft certified, while the HTML VizCreator Flex is not Microsoft certified. For a visual to be certified, it needs to comply with certain rules from Microsoft. One of those rules is that it cannot access external sources. And when I say external sources, let's just think of that as the internet. That's an external source. It's not part of the data set. The Flex, on the other hand, doesn't need to deal with this restriction. This is why it can access the internet, which is also why this visual right here must be using the VizCreator Flex, because those two images are coming from the internet. So this visual would not work with the cert. That's exactly why on the very first page, I converted the image into base64, because this also works with the certified visual. So that's just an important limitation for certified visuals. The additional functionality that we get is we can export to PDF and PowerPoint, and certified visuals are also displayed when you have an image of the report in an email subscription of a report. The VizCreator Flex would not be displayed in those emails, and also when you export to PowerPoint PDF, it will not display. And two more important things, limitations, that should be a small s, for the certified visuals, is that at least currently, it doesn't support CSS classes, and it doesn't support SVGs. I'm going to talk about both of these things a bit more later on, CSS and SVG. But basically, the cert is the one which is certified, which means Microsoft says it's safe to use, but the Flex has a bit more functionality. Our goal is to still improve and work on both of them. We're not planning to get rid of one of them, because both are important. Both of them are maintained, both of them get updates and new features are added. Yeah. Also, both of them can be found in AppSource. And we have just recently renamed the visuals. We also renamed the company. So currently, I'm already using the new names in demos and presentations, but whenever we have an update for AppSource, we need to go through a process. So this just simply takes a bit longer. Currently, if we search for HTML, that's where we still find them. Well, also find them in the future. But you see that they still have the old names. So the certified visuals, they all have this blue certification badge. The certified used to be called HTML text styler. The non-certified, the HTML VizCreator Flex, used to be called HTML and CSS viewer. But very soon, we will publish updates, new releases anyway. So very soon that confusion will hopefully go away. By the way, in my presentation today, I'm already using the latest version, which is currently not on AppSource yet. So if you are an existing user of the visuals, you will see that there's some new things in here. So the header placeholder, for example, doesn't exist yet in the live version, but it will be available very soon. And what this header placeholder does, we will see in here. This page is about tools. You've already seen a couple of them. You've already seen our knowledge base, which is not really a tool, but it's our website, which is a very good starting point when you want something specific. If you want to add, I don't know, music to your report, there is a knowledge base article about how to add sound to a report. And there's lots of topics, and it's growing. So we always add new topics. Whenever we get a question from a client, we try to, and if we don't have a knowledge base article yet, we actually try to create a knowledge base article. So the next person having the same or similar question can just refer to the knowledge base. So please go take a look and see what we have there. Our YouTube channel, of course, yeah, showing how to work with the visuals. The image converter we already saw, the HTML editor, I think one of the most powerful tools that we have for people that don't know HTML, that you just have a simple rich text editor, you create whatever you want, and it's giving you the code. Okay, let's look at how this was created. This visual here looks like a regular table. Well, it is a regular table, but let's still see how it was created, because it contains a few things which, again, are difficult to do with the native visual. Because I mentioned the header placeholder, which is new, let me explain what it does. Or let's start with the rows, actually, because this is the first time I show you something where we actually load something from the data. So before I always just created measures. Now we have a table. Let's look at the table tools. Simple table contains some information about the tools, description, the URL, and two different sort order logics. The sort order, but I'll talk about sort order a bit more, so we can click and change the sorting of the table. But the content, I think, is much more important. Let's look at the DAX or the HTML used to create this table. This time I'm not going to recreate it. This time I want to talk a little bit how you could read this. So what is this code? It is a table. It says table. Okay, so generally we are creating a table. This table has one TR, meaning it has one row. So TR stands for table row. And it has two TDs, meaning two columns. TD stands for table data. Let me just move it down a bit. This is column 1. This is column 1. This is column 2. This is column 2. And then we define the content of each cell. So for the first row, the first column, we add, so basically this. We have an ahref, which is just a hyperlink. And then now we start to use variables, because the link is different for every tool. So we created a variable called var URL, which is just selected value of the URL column. Okay? And we have a few other variables. We also have a color, which is this light blue text here. We could also say this should be green. It works with HTML, understands hex code, RGB, or just plain names of colors. Strong means that the word is bold. So if I get rid of the strong, it will not be bold anymore. And then we again say the content of this cell should be var tool, which is coming from this variable. It's just the name of the tool. But why do we have 4 rows while here I only defined 1? Because quite simply, because I filled something into the category field. And the category field means that the defined logic is repeated for every row of my table. and I have 4 rows, which means I get 4 rows in here. If I get rid of the category, it doesn't show anything anymore because there's no, the selected value measure just doesn't return anything. So this makes sure that my tables can grow and they can have a dynamic number of rows. If I get more tools in the table, I would get a 5th row, a 6th, and a 7th. One thing I want to mention about the header is a specific placeholder. So of course, we can have a sticky header. So it always sticks to the top. If I don't want it to be a sticky header, it's one of the newly added features where I can say, actually, the header should scroll with the visual. And I can also format different things. So I can do formatting in HTML, but also I can just format it from the formatting pane. Both is possible. HTML always wins. If I now for the row would say, change the font color to blue, the green here, because it's defined in HTML, always overrules the formatting. Just something to take note of. Okay, I think that's it for here. We go to a new page where we talk about this. I want to delete, where we talk about P&L statements. P&L statements. If you work in finance, P&L statements are not an easy thing to do in Power BI sometimes, depending on what you want. If you want to have very specific look and feel, they can be tricky to do. And some things are very difficult to do, if not impossible. If we just look at what we have here, there is a lot of added functionality which is difficult to do with native tables. One of them, which I want to point out, is that we have within the row description, so the account description, we actually have a value, 56%, which is 1,400 is 56% of the total revenue. And of course, it's dynamic. When I change the region, the value changes, which can add a lot of value, I think. Same with different formatting, because if people are used to having their P&L exactly in this view, which of course you can do in Excel easily, in Power BI, not that easy. It's useful. If they're used to having this as the view, just try to give them the same thing in Power BI, especially if you're just implementing Power BI new. You don't want to take away from people what they are used to see, what they've seen for years, and give them something completely new. You know, slowly adapt them to changes and first give them what they're used to. We have different formatting. We have, again, a percentage as part of the table. We also have the main message, which even if I'm not a finance person, everybody understands this message. Main message, I think that's best practice. Give the users a possibility to just read the main message in plain words, giving them adding some conditional formatting. So if they look at this and say, see, it's green, they know it's good. If it's red, they see, oh, hang on, I need to be careful, something's not good yet. We don't have time to recreate this today, but I want to still show you what's happening in the background. Because what I did is I created, let's call it, I don't know, a formatting definition table. I think when I zoom, it's not sharp anymore. So for every account, I defined if it should show bold or underlined or indented or what background color it should have, which makes this fully dynamic. I could just change the light gray to black or green or yellow, and it would just work. And again, I can also use hex code for colors. And once I have this, the rest is not that difficult. If we look at the code used, of course, I use a lot of variables because I first need to retrieve the data from my data model, which later on I want to add to the specific cells. So for example, I want to get the name of the account. So I can then later on place it within the table. I also need to get the, I don't know, the background color, the font color, so that later on really I can make everything dynamic. So the code of the table itself is again one row, 3 columns. The TDs, remember, are columns. Oh, one thing I didn't mention is this title tag. The title tag is sort of like a tooltip sort of thing, which I only get to see when I hover over certain things. So when I hover over this row, I get more information about how this row, this account is calculated. And the nice thing is that these title tags are for one specific cell. So really only when I hover in this cell, it's shown. When I hover over here, nothing is shown. So I can really have on hover pop-ups, tooltips, whatever you want to call it, per specific element. But what I would really like to show you, yeah, we still have a bit of time, okay, is how this message was created. So let's see if we find out. It is part of the P&L header. Why do I know that? Because the rows are what is repeated by the category placeholder. And this is what is completely static. Well, the content can be dynamic, as we saw, like the numbers here are dynamic, but it doesn't change when new rows are added. So I know that this must be coming from the header, the P&L header. And when I look at it, I can see that the only dynamic part of this is that measure. Everything else is hard-coded. Everything else is just hard-coded because the header itself, it doesn't really change. So there must be a measure called P&L message. Let's look at this P&L message measure, and let's recreate just a few things. I probably don't have time to recreate all of it, but let's just try to, so you get an idea of how to approach something like this. Our message will be the net result of North America. Let me just put this here. I go back to the HTML editor and I type the net result of North America is, the value that I put in here doesn't matter because it needs to be made dynamic later on anyway, is -50 below plan. I want this value to be bold and I want this to be red. So this is my message. Copy the measure, paste it in here. And let's add a visual to the canvas to see what it looks like. Of course, it's not what we are expecting yet. This is our message. Get this out of the way. Right now, everything is hard-coded. We turn off the tooltip for this. But now we start making it dynamic. So what exactly needs to be dynamic? This 100 needs to be dynamic. So for this 100, we want to, you know what, let's make it a bit different so we save a bit of time. So I don't need to recreate all the variables because the variables contain a lot of tags and I don't want to show you too much tags and focus on the HTML specifics. So the net result of North America. I don't want it to be North America. I want it to be the selected value from the region. So I just get rid of the hard-coded text. And then I need to have double quote because I switch from HTML to DAX and %. Then I add the variable. Then again, and % and double quote. So now this North America here should already be linked. Oh, it's not. Ah, of course, using the wrong measure. So now this should already be changing. The 100 is still the same, but the region already changes. And that is the same principle for all this. The 100 is another variable, var value, and then the color is also coming from a variable. So we say if the variance, if my actuals are above plan, it should be green. If not, it should be red. So I just replace the RGB color with my var color. The -50 should be probably the var variance. And the below plan, it's also not always below, it could be above or below. So only the word below, I also change with the var above below. And I think that's it. This should now be completely dynamic depending what I want to show. And then I just place this measure into the existing one, as you saw before, to have one visual. Everything is included in one visual. Even though we have separate measures, we can reuse them. All right, I need to speed up a little bit so we still have time for Q&A. Filters. This topic is about filters. I think it's important that a user looking at the report knows exactly what data is filtered. So when I have a filter on high rise, I could give them a tooltip showing them what has been filtered. Apply filters is on buildings, high rise. If I also select the country, go here and see, you have selected Canada's country and high rise as building. I think it's best practice whenever somebody looks at the report, they need to know exactly what they look at. And it's also something that's easy to do with HTML. We have a report page tooltip with a simple calculation, which is checking if we have filters applied on the two slicers we currently have on the page. And if yes, it shows something. If not, it doesn't. And we have another measure here, which does more or less the same thing. We check if we have filters. If yes, we show a warning message with a little warning symbol. By the way, to add emojis, you can press Windows and full stop on your keyboard and you get the emoji keyboard. And then we have this no filter applied if nothing is applied. Personally, I think if nothing is applied, we just don't show anything, right? We only need to know if something was applied, which is also bringing the nice effect that now we don't get a tooltip, right? So this is just, nobody sees that this is there. It's just, it's not existing for the user. Only when I filter, I get to see it. Of course, cross-filtering is also active for our visual. So this is again a multi-card visual. So we're using the category placeholder to have a card visual, a KPI card visual, which by the way can also be very nicely designed in the HTML editor. There's actually videos on our YouTube channel showing how to create cards. And also here we see 3 countries which are filtered are shown in the filter. The sorting, I mentioned it before, but I think it's also something that is important. Not always do I want to have the same sorting. So with the additional sorting placeholder, we can have dynamic sorting. So now head count, I have the biggest head count on top. When I click on cost per hire, I have the largest cost per hire on top. So depending what's important for the specific user, let them decide what they need to see. And I think sorting is important. So I don't need to find the numbers. I just know I want to look at number of females. I see USA the highest number. And there's something else I wanted to mention. Yes. I think everybody working with Power BI knows the struggle with edit interactions. Especially when you have a lot of visuals, it's difficult to edit interactions and turn on and off cross-filtering. So what we said is, you know what? We just add a formatting option. So you can just turn off cross-filtering entirely, and now the visual just doesn't filter anymore. Or you turn it on, and then you just use the individual edit interactions. But yeah, you could just turn it off, and when I click, I don't filter anymore. All right. Comments. I think for me, comments super important because values simply don't tell the entire story. So having text as comments and is fantastic idea, but of course it only makes sense if people know what's important. So adding some formatting to highlight what's important is essential. And this is also something that can be easily done with the HTML VizCreator visuals in different ways. How it's saved. Normally, when we implement this for clients, we use Power Apps or Power BI embedded solutions, but it really depends on the requirements. But yeah, and again, of course, as I mentioned, everything is always dynamic. So we can let the users decide what font size they want. Or we could let them decide how many columns they want. 2 columns, 3 columns, anything. Also quite important, you see that we have justified text, which I think as of now is still not possible with native visuals. For us, this is just one simple line of code. Where is it? The comment has here text align justify. The standard is being left aligned, but we can have justify, which I think makes sense if we have a lot of text. And of course, also with HTML and SVGs, or also without SVGs, depending on what we want, we can create bar charts. So also this chart here is created using one of our visuals. And because we have a measure defining what it looks like, we can also easily switch between completely different charts, again, without the need of bookmarks and that sort of thing, which will make it much easier to maintain. Because I think bookmarks are great, but especially if you have a lot of visuals and you have you modify, you add more visuals, it might be difficult to manage and maintain the relationships of the different bookmarks and buttons and show and hide and all this. But we're doing everything with DAX, so we just have 2 different bar charts defined. There is also a knowledge base article specifically about bar charts. And a good starting point is if you say, oh, this is nice, but I don't want to rewrite this entire code. A good idea is to download the sample report, copy paste the code, and just then individually change little pieces of the code and make it work for your data model. End user help, I find it, I'm laughing because this, what you see on the left, it was actually, you can see it here, it was generated by ChatGPT, but not only the text itself, but everything. So I told ChatGPT, please write down the advantages of Power BI in HTML, add a table of content with anchor links. Anchor links means when I click on one of these elements, it automatically scrolls down to the section that I've selected, and also add expand and collapsible details. I didn't read what it says here, but everything here was done by AI, which is quite amazing. But end user help or descriptive pages or elements, I think super important in a report to maybe explain how KPIs are calculated, how to use a report, anything that can help a user or explain the report better. Or if you have the time, also record a video. So we also can embed videos into our reports. So again, this video is hosted online on, well, it's on an Azure Blob Storage, and we just basically stream this video from Azure Blob into our report. I'm already 2 minutes over time, I'm aware of that, but I'm on my last page, which is the Q&A, and it's not me asking the audience questions, but I still put some questions here, which might help you to come up with your own questions. So please feel free to, yes.
Yes, we actually have 2 questions from the audience. I have already answered them very quickly, but maybe if you can elaborate, maybe that would be great also to have a little bit more details and your thoughts around it. So
yeah,
the first
absolutely.
question is from Khalil. It's about the drill options in the table. That was in relation to the P&L table that you were presenting, because there were, you know, some sort of groupings and hierarchies of various elements. And then the second question is from Bastian about the number of rows in the table, if they can be pulled automatically from the database.
Okay, so yeah, okay. So the drill down was, well, currently the category placeholder only allows for one element. It is in our backlog to allow multi-elements, so we can sort of, yeah, drill down from main accounts to detail accounts and so on. It's not an easy thing to implement, but it is in our backlog. So it's because I think it's extremely powerful. So it's definitely something we want to do. But what is already possible, and you saw it here, we can expand and collapse, which is not really, I don't know what's really meant with drill down, but we have the option to expand, collapse the HTML tag is called details. So the detailed tag always has a summary. The summary is what's always visible. And then below we have the part which is only shown when the user expands. So that's already possible. The multi elements in the category is in, yeah, not in development yet, but it's what we're planning to do. So I hope that answers question number 1. Question number 2 was about if the rows can be pulled from the database. Yes. So as a simple example, in the tools table, I'm using, and because this is a demo report, let me just arrange this. Because it's a demo report, I'm not actually loading from somewhere. I have created my tables in Power Query. But let's assume this was connected to whatever source. And I just added tomorrow, when I refresh, I get two more tools, right? I would get two more tools. So when I refresh this, we will now get two more rows in here, which hopefully answers the question. So yes, the tables, if I'm using, so we have the two more tools. If I'm using the category placeholder, then tables grow with the data that is coming from my data set. Yes. I hope I answered this. Anything else? Maybe one more thing I want to mention, because you remember when I did this table in Excel, this element here was actually created in PowerPoint. So it's also something we can do. It's actually one of those smart arts. Created an element, saved it as an SVG, imported the SVG code. I'm not going to show all the details, but and then we have a like nice looking element, which again doesn't need to. It's not like different elements grouped together and stuff. This is the entire code for what we see here. So really the sky is the limit, huh? So whatever you think you might want to create, I think most of it should be possible. So PowerPoint and Excel could actually be added to our list of tools, even though they're not ours. They are extremely helpful when creating elements for the HTML VizCreator. And for more sophisticated elements, we use Adobe Illustrator. Because of course what I showed was from a visualization point of view, not super fancy, let's say, but we can also create everything you see on my screen now was also created with the VizCreator cert. So, and again, of course, everything is dynamic. And we can also do things like that. But of course, to do this, you need a designer that really knows what they're doing. And yeah, I wouldn't manage to fit this because I'm also not the Adobe person to fit this into an hour. But lots of different use cases in the sample report. So I highly recommend going over to, I think it's bisamurai/download, where you get the latest versions of our sample reports. Because again, on AppSource, everything is always a bit old. So if you want the latest reports, the website is where we, of course, have full control what we publish. So that's where you get the latest versions. All right. Any other questions or comments or wishes, feature requests? Feature requests from our co-hosts, or what is your favorite feature maybe? What are you like to use the visuals most for? Let's just have another few minutes.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pascal. It's Rakesh. What I want to also, for one of the favorite features for me is the ability to use the HTML Flex visual to be able to contact or make call outs to customers. For example, in a contact center, you're getting a whole lot of calls, and sometimes calls are abandoned, and you could have that abandoned calls feeding into through the database live on your Power BI dashboard, and from there, either it's sitting with a manager or a supervisor or team leader, they could immediately see all the calls that are being abandoned and then dial a customer out from the dashboard directly. So I think that was a phenomenal feature, which I did some time back for a client, and they simply loved it in terms of just the customer experience point of view.
Yes, fantastic feature. Well, fantastic feature, which unfortunately was blocked. So the feature Rakesh is talking about is to have buttons, and when I click on a button, I can automatically place a phone call from Skype or Teams, or if I have an internal phone system, or my whatever tools I have in my company. Unfortunately, this feature has been blocked, but because we have implemented this solution for at least 2 call center clients, yeah, we found a workaround, and we now have implemented, and it's not live yet. Our plan is to go live in Q1, so well, in April. That's our plan. There's still a few things we need to test and improve, but basically it works. I'm going to, this is our sample report. Let me just click one of these phone numbers, and because these phone call protocol has been blocked and there's nothing we can do against that, we have created this bridger. We call it, well, bridger. That's what we call this tool, which basically redirects this call to my phone system. This page, of course, will look a bit nicer, but you see now it's asking me if I want to open up Skype, and it opens up Skype, and it already has the number. Let's check the number which I selected here, and I only need to see, yeah, okay, call, and it's calling this number. Try with a different number. So this would be +33, I think it was. Say yes, and I can directly make phone calls. So yes, fantastic feature. Unfortunately been blocked. Our workaround is nearly done to go live. And then, by the way, if anybody is interested in this, if you say, oh, that's a cool functionality, we're looking for testers. So we're looking for real life testers. We have tested it quite extensively online. Internally, we know a couple of the limitations and bugs we still have. If you think that would be a nice feature, please reach out to us, and we can give you an early access so you can test the new bridger, what we call it. Yeah, good functionality. Thanks for that.
Awesome, thank you.
So I think we are already 15 minutes over time. If there's nothing else coming from the chat, I think let's see if there's still some people here. Yes. So thank you everyone for joining us here today. I hope you saw that with the use of some HTML and our custom visuals, there's a lot that you can do to improve your Power BI reports. The sky is the limit. Just go ahead, look at our website, look at the tools we provide, download the sample reports, visit the YouTube channel, the knowledge base, and I promise it will be easier than you might think to get started. And of course, just simply reach out to support@bisamurai.com, and we're just happy to help. So thank you very much, and hopefully see you next time. Bye-bye.